Hi, I'm Shanti Sumartayo, and this is
Yolandi Stringers.
And in this video, we're going to talk about creating research impact beyond academic audiences. So Yolanda, you're really experienced in this, and one of your standout figures is Resource Man. Can you tell me about Resource Man?
Sure, so Resource Man is a fictional persona or a character that I created, but he's not my creation in the sense that he is an embodiment or a reflection on what my research shows the energy industry thinks energy consumers are.
Right.
So Resource Man is an idealised energy consumer. He's rational, he's efficient, he controls appliances in the home through automation, operates pretty much autonomously and individually, makes kind of decisions based on price signals that might be coming from the energy sector about, how much energy costs at different times of the day. And is very much able to account for many of the changes that are happening in the energy sector at the moment around having renewable energy generation, trying to change our usage to different times of the day to manage the grid. And so he's very much kind of the product of the industry and how they want people to behave in the future in relation to their energy consumption.
Yeah.
But also, his name's Resource Man because he also reflects those aspirations in other industries, like the water industry as well.
Okay.
So he came from originally my PhD research and then subsequent research, which just kept finding him over and over again. He does exist in homes, so there's often quite a number of people who want to and do use energy in that way, in that very kind of, they aspire to be efficient and autonomous and in control and rational in their energy demand. But what I also found in my research was that Resource Man's efforts were often thwarted by other household members, particularly women, children and pets. And what typically happens is that the various activities of the home are the ones that dominate energy consumption. When the laundry needs to get done, who's cold or hot, or who wants to use the television at a certain time of day, or how to get all the kids fed and in bed before they kind of have a meltdown. So these are the kinds of considerations that don't fit very well with that Resource Man model, and why I kind of critiqued the model and thought, well, this isn't really a great way of this isn't a realistic way of achieving the ambitions of the energy sector. So you'll notice that Resource Man is a man, so that's obviously a deliberate gendering in two ways. One, because men are, in my research I found that men are more likely to kind of embody that sentiment and want to behave like Resource Man, even though they often can't because of the reasons I just said. But also he's imagined in the image of a very male-dominated set of industries, particularly engineering and economics. And the energy industry is dominated by those professions, and those professions are dominated by men. So one of my critiques of Resource Man was that he was imagined in the image of those industries.
Yeah.
But he's my creation because I needed something to disrupt that vision.
Yeah, okay.
So he was a kind of impact intervention, if you like.
Great, okay. So tell us about the kind of impact, you've sort of constructed this figure. Tell us about the kind of impact you were able to have with Resource Man.
So I've used him in a number of ways to present the assumptions and the stereotypes the industry has of consumers back at the industry. It's like a mirror.
Great.
So I mean, I could do it in other ways as well, and you can present research findings, and you can tell people that, hey, your assumptions might be flawed. But he was a really playful way of doing that, and quite an effective way, I found, because when I was presenting it to sometimes roomfuls of engineers, male engineers, they could see, because it was a mirror, they could see how they were projecting their own ideas and their own engineering principles or economic principles into the home. But they could also see how that was deeply flawed because they all lived in homes as well. We all live in homes, and often there are people and other people and children and pets and various other things going on in those homes. So they could see how that vision, even in their own homes, was being disrupted by everything else that was going on. And the disruption was a method of trying to change the thinking in the industry. That was really my intention, was to say, hey, this is not the right way to be thinking about people. It's one way, but it's really kind of missing the point, if the point is to try and get people to use energy differently or to reduce their consumption, if that's the end goal, if that's what you want to achieve as an industry, you need to be going about it a different way. You can't be just trying to turn everybody into resource men. I don't think that's a very effective strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And, mostly when I kind of explained it and used the concept, they agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's an incremental change. There's certainly not all rejecting resource man. He still exists, and the ideas behind his existence are still very much alive and well in the energy industry. But it's an incremental shift. There's more recognition now through this work and other people's work of the home being, a household full of not just one consumer, not just one resource man, but a whole collection of people. Of the home not just being a place where people make rational choices about energy, but being a place where people do the laundry, where people heat and cool their homes, where they make decisions and do things that have no connection in their minds to energy at the time. And so they're the things that, if you want to change energy consumption, they're the things that actually need to be focused on.
Mm-hmm. So what kinds of, so in using Resource Man as a device to speak to diverse audiences, what kinds of changes do you think, you were able to encourage, through his use?
Well, certainly, I guess there's a number of different audiences that he's reached, and so I guess the impact's been different there. In the energy industry, it's certainly inspired, I would say, a number of other programs that are more focused on what people do in their homes and how they use energy, rather than trying to get them to behave like Resource Man. So it has incrementally shifted policy and practice in the energy industry. I think that's fair to claim. Obviously, it's not the only thing, but certainly it's been a contributor to that in Australia and internationally as well. In the human interaction design community, I've used Resource Man to disrupt how technologies are sort of being designed to support the Resource Man vision. So typically the kinds of technologies that fall into this category are energy or eco-feedback devices, which give people information about how much energy they've used and the costs of that. And so it's kilowatt hours, costs, and greenhouse gas emissions. So that's one technology. Also automated kind of devices, so things that maybe tell you when it might be cheaper to use the washing machine, or devices that try and schedule you to use energy or that device at a different time of day. So there's lots of work going on in the HCI community about energy technologies that kind of fit within that Resource Man area. And what my research and other researchers has tried to do there is shift the focus again away from, let's just get everyone thinking about energy and how to use it efficiently, and on to how do we change when people do the laundry based on the things that are important to them about laundry. So things that are important to people about laundry are, how their clothes smell and how they look and present themselves to the world, and whether or not their kids got a clean uniform for school the next day. So how do you actually disrupt that or change that with an energy lens, rather than just focusing on giving people energy information? So that's kind of the way I've used it there. And then the final one I was going to mention is in academia as well. Resource Man has been informing debates there more broadly about how we think about energy consumers and shifting or changing energy consumption in the home. So he's kind of gone on as a concept to have an impact in other people's research as well, and to help disrupt this framing in the ways that research is being conducted internationally.
Yeah, great. So I want to ask you in a moment about how you sort of think about a strategy for reaching a wide audience in your work, but perhaps as an entry to that question, you could talk to me a little bit about the Future Grid research that you and Larissa Nichols have done, and how that's been a way to reach a broad audience.
Sure. So Future Grid was a project funded by Energy Consumers Australia again, and it was with Larissa Nichols, Paula Akari, Rex Martin and Andrew Glover. So we, in that project, we were interested in how we engage households towards this concept of the future grid, which is an energy industry concept again, and it's the future where we have localised energy generation, we have automated technologies, price responses that may be encourage you to use energy when it's more available and less at other times of the day. So it's a whole kind of range of concepts about where the energy industry is heading. Not well understood, and it's something that's actually occurring across the world. It's not just an Australian kind of concept. But the industry is interested and I guess struggling with how they engage households and people towards that vision. So that was what our work was focused on. We did we did interviews with industry stakeholders. We also did some household work with people who are already on their way to that vision. So they have solar and battery technologies, or they're participating in some form of program that the energy industry, where the industry helps them to shift their demand. So they were the kinds of things that we were looking at in our ethnographic work. But what we did with that project to create impact was translate all those materials into a set of exemplar programs that we said to the industry, these are the kinds of programs you could try to engage people towards this vision based on our research. So it's taking that step beyond your empirical material and beyond the findings and even beyond the implications of the findings and putting them into something that your target audience, in our case the energy industry, can use, can go, oh, we could deliver this program, or we can see how these ideas translate into this practical thing you've given us. As not necessarily as a program we were expecting them to roll out as is, but as an inspiration and to get them, using our materials in line with their thinking. So some of the examples we gave there were, we had a meme program to engage teenagers and young adults in understanding what a future grid is, and that was actually inspired by the New South Wales Police, who have done similar memes to kind of engage younger groups of people. We had an idea of a community splash park, so not typically thought of as an form of engagement, but that was about trying to, putting splash parks in vulnerable areas where they don't have access to air conditioning or they can't afford air conditioning, and creating other forms of cooling, I suppose, in community areas to help with heat waves and peak demand in Australia, which is a big issue for us and for the energy sector. So that was kind of an engagement, but kind of quite thinking outside the box kind of idea. We also looked at ways to provide cooling for pets, because heating and cooling for pets is a really major growth area in Australia, and we have one of the highest rates of pet ownership anywhere in the world.
Really?
Yes, we do. We both have pets.
We do.
And people are increasingly heating and cooling their homes more for pets. So, it's an area that is starting to and will continue to contribute to energy demand. So how do you kind of change that pattern? We were looking at programs that give people cooling pet mats, and also engaging with the veterinary sector around what advice people actually need to keep their pets safe and comfortable in extreme weather, without just running the air conditioning all day, which is what some people are starting to do. So different kind of ways of thinking about engagement using the materials from our findings and also from other sources.
So that concept of translating your work into sort of even speculative ideas that industry or sort of public partners more broadly can understand. I mean, it gets me to my sort of last question for this video, which is about how you think about reaching those diverse audiences when you're designing a project. Is that part of how you think about research design, or does it just sort of emerge as you go?
Well, I think it's both. I think you can have a strategy for dissemination and for engagement and impact, but you can also be opportunistic. And it will partly depend on what you find, and not all projects start with a clear audience in mind, like many of mine and ours currently do. The people, the audience you want to reach with your findings emerges at the end, and you're like, oh wow, there's a really interesting insight or implication here for this group. And so you think about that then. But for some of our more applied projects, we build in a plan for dissemination right from the beginning. So with our energy projects, for example, we know that the impact needs to reach the energy sector, policy and industry audiences. So from the beginning, we'll look at how we will do that. Usually all of our projects in that area have an industry report, and that report is accompanied by a launch. It's often also accompanied by some sort of trade or industry article, but also some popular media engagement, and we share and sort of create interest and amplify the attention to that through social media channels as well, which reach different audiences. So LinkedIn might be more of a kind of industry policy audience, whereas Twitter or Facebook might be more of a, well, Twitter for me is more of an academic audience, but that's how I've crafted my followers. And Facebook is kind of just more of a general forum and my friends. But sometimes they're also people who have connections and can share things for you. So, start with whatever you've got, basically, would be my advice. And, there are many ways to kind of place and reach the audience that you want to get with your work. I don't think it's always about just going for the biggest numbers. It's about reaching the people you want to reach. And sometimes with your research, there are many audiences you want to reach, or many possible audiences you could reach. So it's about thinking about the angle for, what's interesting to just people who, with my research, it's what's interesting to energy consumers. What would they kind of want to take away from this piece of work? Whereas for industry or policy audiences, it's quite different, and the publications I might target for them, or the forums I might target for them, might be quite different. Actually, industry conferences are also really excellent for reaching those groups of people, because industry and policy audiences, they often don't have the time to read or digest even a report. So just giving a short 10-minute presentation to that audience can be a really effective way of getting a message across.
So it's about tailoring meaningful and relevant content from your research to each sort of specific audience that you want to reach. Great. Thank you very much, Yolande. And thank you for joining us in our video about creating impact beyond academic audiences.